Okay, it's 10:40 by my time. Why don't, how can we start?
All right, I have a statement from President Clark that I will read to you. President Clark says, I really appreciate everyone that filled out a survey. I have had the honor of being on the BOG for into 6 years or seasons, as former WSBA President Bill Pickett would call them. In FY20, the BOG met prior and came up with some common strategic goals for the year. That really helped me as the then treasurer to be able to focus on work that worked towards those goals. This special meeting retreat is meant for us to look at potentially setting and prioritizing as a group some of the suggested goals for the year. I think all of the suggestions are great ones, and certainly we can have primary and secondary goals for the year too, if that is what we want to do as a group. I think it is important that Tara and the exec team and I hear from the board on this and get direction versus us unilaterally stating what is important to us. So thank you again for giving up your Saturday to be here. I look forward to us having hopefully a productive, respectful, and collaborative retreat this morning. All right, so I am going to be facilitating our activities today, but I also want to be clear that President Clark and I have worked on this together, and a lot of this really reflects our shared vision and our shared desire to come together on clarity around what our goals are for the year. So I'm going to start us off with sort of a get to know each other activity. When you look at the agenda, you'll note that under each activity, I have a purpose statement. A few years ago, someone on the executive leadership team suggested that I start doing that with our retreats. And I think it's been useful not only for helping people have buy-in into why we're engaging into a particular activity, but it also really forces me as the planner to make sure that I know why we're doing it and I'm not just throwing things on the agenda. So the purpose of this is to help us really sort of get present in a retreat mind, and also try to, have a little fun, get to know each other a little better. I think we all acknowledge that this would be easier and possibly more fun in person, but we're going to do our best to use this technology we're going to have some small group sessions, and hopefully some time to really connect with one another and make the best out of the technology that we have. So what we're going to do, I'm going to move everyone into small groups of 3 to 4. And your activity is to talk amongst yourself and try to come up with 3 things that you all have in common. So for example, we are all born in Oregon, or we are all the oldest sibling in our family. So you're just going to talk amongst yourself. You'll have about 20 minutes. Try to come up with 3 things you have in common. We're not going to report out. It's just really an activity to spend some time together and get to know each other. So I'm going to move you into your breakout session now, unless there are any questions. All right, here we go. Just give folks a few more minutes to come back. All right. I hope people had fun with that. I know my group came up with 3 things really fast. I don't know how it went for everybody else. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move us right into our next topic, which is a little bit about sort of setting the table for why we want to set goals, how we can make our goals effective, and also thinking about what criteria might we want to apply when we're selecting goals. So Kevin, could you go ahead and share the PowerPoint? Thank you. So again, President Clark and I have spent a lot of time talking about how much we both value setting goals as a team. And, I think there's lots of good reasons, but I think the top ones that come to mind are 1, effectiveness. You've probably all heard that Yogi Berra quote, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. And I think a lot of times, we don't really sit down and take the time to think about where we want to go and how we're going to get there and what success is going to look like. And so we just sort of move forward and end up where we end up. Another thing that we may not always think about is communication. When we set goals, we're really communicating to each other, to the staff, to the members, to our volunteers, that this is what our priority is right now. So setting goals can be a really important communication tool. And then also promoting teamwork. If you imagine that the Bar Association is like a boat and some of us are rowing north and some of us are rowing east, you know, it's not very helpful. But if we know what the goals are and we've come to them together, we can hopefully be all rowing in the same direction. And lastly, accountability. You know, setting goals and especially articulating what success looks like can really help us to hold ourselves accountable to the things that we said that as a group that we want to do. Next slide. One of the things that President Clark and I have talked a lot about is sort of thinking about what is the planning cycle the board. And we haven't set goals in this way. I mean, we do have high-level strategic goals, and those are included in the packet if you want to take a look at them. But those are really high-level. Those are big, broad categories of focus. And they're the kind of goals that we may never actually achieve, right? They're always going to be there. We're always going to be striving to provide high quality member services. We're always going to be striving for a diverse and equitable profession. You know, we're probably not going to check the box and be done. The goals that we're setting today, hopefully, are going to be things that we can actually accomplish, that we can check the box and say, okay, we did that. And we haven't done that in a while. And so, you know, whenever you do that, it can be sort of awkward to get the timing right. The visual on the screen is a potential plan for a planning cycle. And you could see that ideally we might be setting goals for the following year during the second quarter. Now that seems really early, but the idea of that would be that we're setting goals before we start to build the budget so that our budget can actually reflect what our goals are. So, you know, better late than never. We're starting now to set our goals for this year. And even though the budget's already done, hopefully we're going to be able to still make good strides in accomplishing them. And hopefully, not that far down the road, we will also set some goals for the following year so that when we go into building our budget for FY24, we will be mindful of what our priorities are. Next slide. So one of the things that we're going to talk about in this next session is what criteria might we want to have for setting goals. And, you know, today is not going to be so much about making decisions. It's more going to be seeing like where our interest is, trying to come to some consensus. You know, it's a short day and we won't be able to get to sort of a perfectly articulated list of goals. But hopefully we're going to make a lot of progress and see again, sort of where the collective interest lies. And likewise, we probably won't come up with a clean set of criteria for choosing goals, but we do want to spend some time thinking about what our criteria should be. And I wanted to share with you, this is a program criteria that the board adopted, I don't know how long ago. It pre-exists my time at the bar, so more than 8 years ago. And if you look in the packet, you can see this, there's that big sheet that has sort of the mission at the top, and it has mission focus areas, and at the very bottom it has some strategic goals, and in the middle it has these program criteria. So at one point, this is the criteria that the organization was using to decide whether or not to adopt a new program. I don't put these up to say this should be our criteria, and I also think these criteria are for a slightly different purpose. This criteria is for what programming we're going to engage in, but just as an example of what you might be thinking about when you think about criteria, and there may be some good thoughts in here. Next slide. All right, so we're going to move into small groups again, and we've got a few questions here, but I'm really hoping that we'll spend the majority of time on that third question, and I'm going to share in the chat a document. See. Sorry, it'll just take me a moment. And if folks could go ahead and once I, oops, one more time. All right. Once I put this link in, if people could go ahead and try and open it and make sure that we don't have any access issues. How are people doing it?
Loading access.
Where's the link?
Works.
Okay, I got some thumbs up.
We're supposed to be able to see it. Are we supposed to be able to edit it as well, or just see it?
Yes, you should be able to edit it as well. Can you edit it?
Not yet,
Nope.
but I have to sign in.
Okay, let me try one more thing. Okay, try that second link and tell me if you can edit it.
Yes, now I can.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody having issues? Just give a shout. All right. So we're going to move into small groups. You're going to talk a little bit about, I told you why President Clark and I think we should set goals, but what do you think about why we should set goals? Or maybe you don't think we should set goals. Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about, what you think is important in terms of making them effective. There's lots of different models for effective goals. A lot of people are familiar with the SMART goals, and there's a lot of other models out there, so you can talk a little bit about that. But what I want you to report out on and hopefully capture on that document that I shared is your group's thoughts on what our criteria should be for selecting goals. And this is a document that everyone can see. Everyone's editing live, so if your group's idea is already on there, you don't need to add it twice. So hopefully we'll come out of this with everyone's collective wisdom on what our criteria should be. And we will have about 30 minutes for this. Before I move everyone into groups, are there any questions about what we're going to do?
Tara, it's Kevin. Are we going to be reporting out? And should someone be appointed to report out?
Yeah, we're going to do a super brief report out, hopefully not spend too much time on it, but yeah, just a real brief report out again on the criteria. So maybe, if there was something that really stuck out for your group or that you want to share with everyone else, that's what we'll report out on. All right. Do one more move here. Okay, I'm going to take you into the breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. I think we've still got a few folks waiting to come back. All right, I think everyone's back. So we've just got a little less than 15 minutes before we break for lunch. I'm going to share the list that we came up with on the screen. And maybe what I would suggest for the report out is maybe each group could pick one or two that just you want to speak to. And then hopefully maybe we'll talk a little bit about everything on the list by the time we're done. All right. Who'd like to go first?
Art
can't-
can go
I'll-
first.
oh.
Nope. Sorry.
How about Alec and then Kevin?
I think one of the bullets, I think the fifth or sixth down, goals should be shared, agreed upon by the officers and the governors. And so in my group was Julie and Dan. And one of the observations Dan made, and I think it was a very good one, is that at times we've had presidents who have established, quote, their goals, but there was not necessarily buy-in or agreement by the Board of Governors. And there was also a question of, so where's the executive director in this? And so the real view is if you're going to establish a goal, this should be shared and agreed upon by all the key parties, so that both there's not confusion or conflict about actually accomplishing that goal. And if that goal is more than a year, there's at least an agreement to carry that through and bring that back now to the next Board of Governors or the new third that's joined, again, to share with that goal. So, but the view was not have that singular by your position, but actually something that's jointly agreed upon and committed to.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes, so Sunitha, Nam, and Doug constituted our group and myself, and we spent a significant amount of time talking about the 12th bullet point. And it's really about the mission and the sort of two prongs of our mission, which is, serving and protecting the public and serving members to ensure the integrity of the legal profession and justice. And so a lot of the questions we centered around for the criteria is, does it directly accomplish protecting the public? Does it directly serve the membership, or does it do both? And then we talked about whenever something is aimed at service of the membership or serving the membership, does it always have sort of the long range objective or what might be considered sort of the touchdown of still advancing or serving the public? So Tara, you're aware of this sort of elevator speech we have in advancement that talks about how we serve the members, and a lot of the ways we serve the members is through programs, benefits, and services that actually invest in them to be more competent legal professionals to further serve and protect the public. So they're more competent in service to their clients and the public, which is why, for instance, we don't offer benefits like travel discounts, because it's not really in furtherance of the mission, the long end mission of serving and protecting the public through service to the members. So we spent a lot of time around that, trying to sort of dissect that and make sure that any criteria we set is in alignment with the mission. And sorry about that. But that's the one. I'll stop there. That's what we spent the most time on. And Doug or Sunitha or Nam, if you've got more to add, feel free.
Thanks, Kevin. I like it when the dogs play you out.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I wanted to add that we also talked about the fact that sometimes an initiative that directly protects the public is not something that the membership perceives as in its service, and that's okay, because that relates to the nature of an integrated bar with a regulatory function.
Thank you. Who else would like to report?
I can go. So we talked a lot about kind of the setting of the goals and how we set and really, I want to say the defining of the goals and thinking about that side of things first. So I think the biggest things we talked about were how to define what done looks like, so that at the start of the goal, we know really, really in detail where we're headed with it, and so we can have better aspects of it, and that it should be measurable. So we, not only do we know what done looks like, but there's a way we can say we accomplished the goal in an objective fashion when we get to the end of it. And then we had kind of broader conversations about like fitting in with a goal and whether or not something, how a goal can be both too big and too small, right? It needs to be definable enough that we have a time frame that is reasonable to accomplish it. But also if it's too small, it might get mixed into, is this just normal WSBA activity? Should we think of this as a board of governors goal, or should it just be something that we just do? And also a little bit, the difference between goals that, are something we're pursuing actively and something kind of aspirational versus goals that have to happen. Like, the new building was the example we had of like, something has to happen. We either have to sign a new lease, change our property, but like something has to happen. So it's not so much aspirational as required. So that was, there was no definite decision on that, but there was just some conversation around how we think about that.
Thank you. Alec, I assume that's an old hand. Okay, Glynis.
I was in a group with Kevin Fay and Brett, and I'm looking at the list. And so I'm trying to point out some things that we talked about that weren't already mentioned. And one of the things we talked about is that goals sometimes can conflict with one another. Different groups interpret goals in different ways, and sometimes they could be in conflict, either with one another or to our overarching goal. We talked about promoting justice as an example and how we interpret that differently and we approach that differently. And it's important to understand these barriers and acknowledge that we're also fighting for resources. And so it's important to prioritize goals because we have limited resources. And that could sometimes, feed into the conflict. The other thing we talked about was the importance of getting buy-in and support for goals, and consensus is important because the process can also help us get a collection of ideas on how to reach the goals. And I will also ask Kevin and Brett to chime in if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Nope.
I think you covered it. That was good.
We go to Francis, and my screen was only showing the people with their faces. So Francis, sorry if I skipped over you. You are up next.
Thank you, Director Nevitt. In my group, I have immediate past President Brian Tollefson and Equity Chief Diana Singleton. And we focus on several things that is on this page, but most importantly, we talked about accountability. We talked about the fact that we are accountable to the Supreme Court, we are accountable to our members, and we are accountable to the public with regards to integrity of the power. And that criteria of accountability should measure any goals that we set. We put up the GR12 as the parameters in which we work on. And we talked about the fact that it's got to be germane and within that parameters, no matter how nebulous people think GR12 is, and that we have to look at it from that point of view. And then we now zero in and we also talk about the resources like the last group did. We talk about the fact that we have finite resources. We can't do everything, and we have to begin to prioritize what we have resources to do. And resources is not just about funding, it's about the time, staff time. It's about volunteer time. And that if you set goals that may appear as sound and good, but you don't have the resources to do it, you will lose volunteers because you told them this is going in, that this is what you're going to do, and you didn't get it done. And then finally, we talked about the impact on the public and on the delivery of legal services, especially for people in the rural areas, people living in poverty. We were really very concerned about self-help, that justice, the people furthest away from accessing legal services are probably going to take laws into their hand. And that is one important reason why this organization should continue to champion justice everywhere we go, especially for people that live on the margin, that's ordinarily may not be able to afford a lawyer, afford an attorney to ventilate their grievances. And we have to be able to help advance their cause too, because when justice is only for those people who can afford it, we all lose. And that it's not about who wins. It's about people having a platform to be able to ventilate their grievances. And procedural justice recommend that for us. Okay. Did I miss anything, Diana and Past President Tollefson?
I think you covered it all.
Thanks, Francis. Yep, covered it.
All right, I think Hunter's up next.
Well, thanks, Tara. So I was in a group with Bobby Henry and Tiffany Lynch and Eric Kading, and we didn't really discuss who was going to report out. So if any of those three want to jump over me, I can't see if any of you have your hands raised. So please feel free to chime in at any point. We discussed a number of the bullets that are already up here, but I wanted to focus in on two. One of them was, should it be a WSBA goal, and are we best positioned to accomplish the goal? The first part of that question is obviously a very big picture question. Should it be a WSBA goal? Is it wise? And all the bullets up there really go to really the analytical parts of answering that question. Related to that, are we best positioned to accomplish the goal? There was some discussion about how we are a big player in the legal profession, but we're not the only one. There is the judiciary. There are the volunteer bar associations. There are other organizations out there that are part of the profession that may be better accomplished, either to take lead or to team with us in working on the goal. The other one that we talked about dealt with the trust question, 2 bullet points down. What will be the impact on trust between WSBA, its members, and the public? And this goes to the issue of declining public trust in its institutions. How do we as an organization, and how do we as a profession build the public's trust in what we are doing? And how do we build and strengthen the members' trust in what we're doing? So those were among a number of other things, the items that we talked about, but I'll turn it over to Bobby and Tiffany and Eric in case I left anything out.
I think you covered it.
Yeah, nothing to add.
Any additional thoughts that anyone wants to share before we break for lunch? All right, President Clark, would you like to take us out for our break?
That's fine. Yeah. I'm great, guys. Thank you so much. And I will reconvene at 1 o'clock. Is that correct, Tara?
Yep, that sounds good.
Great.
See
Thank
y'all
you.
then.